The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to those expressing them and do not necessarily reflect the OSIP Foundation Incorporated or any other group or individual. This podcast may contain dialogue or subject material that could be considered for mature audiences only. All aspects of how you play the game and the OSIP Foundation Incorporated are protected by copyright and other state and federal intellectual property laws. Unauthorized use without the express written consent of the OSIP Foundation Incorporated is strictly prohibited. If you're interested in sponsoring How You Play the Game, please email us at podcast@osipfoundation.org. Your sponsorship may be tax deductible. Well, it's that time again. No, it's not time to wonder why anyone would carry a 2-iron in their bag. It's time for How You Play the Game, the official podcast of the OSIP Foundation Incorporated. Yours truly, Jack Furlong, with you as we talk to you about what's going on as far as the world of sportsmanship is concerned. This is the second episode of the month of December. The year is 2020. Glad to be with you. As always, check us out online at osipfoundation.org. You can contact the show. The address is podcast@osipfoundation.org. And on social media, facebook.com/OSIP Foundation and Twitter and Instagram, both at OSIP Foundation, hashtag How You Play the Game. Across the way from me on the screen, as always, the producer engineer, Mr. Sean Ryan. Sean, hello. How are you?
Well, I'm alive. How are you?
I too can claim this. So I think we're all in the same boat, and we can't ask for anything more. We have a fantastic guest with us today, coming to us all the way from across the Atlantic Ocean in a small country known as England. He is the managing director of a company that he founded called The Third Team, which you can check out at thethirdteam.co.uk. Mr. Nathan Sheratt. Nathan, how are you? Thanks so much for joining us today.
I'm really good, thanks, Jack. Obviously it's a delight to be joining you. Yes, we're really pleased. Thanks very much.
It is our pleasure. Let's start with the question that is on everyone's mind. How is your golf game right now?
It's not great, and that has to be partly put down to me not applying myself enough, and partly down to Her Majesty's government here in the UK not allowing me to play golf for the last month.
This is proof positive why we clearly needed to escape in the 1700s and start the Revolutionary War. So we're going to rewrite the textbooks right now, just to just to make sure that footnote is in there,
so that we can all play golf.
You nailed it, Sean.
That's the reason.
Listen. My handicap just dropped to about 30 and change, so we've got to get out there. That's what Her Majesty would want.
Okay.
And I have no evidence to support that. Nathan, we're having you on because I stumbled upon your site and your company, The Third Team. And why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about what you do with it, and then we'll get into how you started it, what you experienced, and we'll kind of just go bit by bit. So start off with a general summary, what the group does, and why it does what it does.
Okay, so really, the sort of the crux of what we're doing now is working with referees. And traditionally, we would have delivered workshops, but obviously we're in the middle of a global pandemic, which was not on the agenda, certainly. And I think this year we had big plans to work with a number of county football associations. So there's 52 county football associations within the national FA in England. And I had a relationship with a lot of them, ready for basically delivering workshops with referees, whether that be in pre-season camps or whether that be in just an evening where I'll, obviously travel to the county FA headquarters and deliver to the referees, whether that be promotion candidates, whether that be Centre of Refereeing Excellence referees, whether that be, new referees, newly qualified referees who are struggling to adapt to some of the demands of working with club officials, with players, with spectators, and the challenges that brings. And I think that really what we're looking to do with those guys is to give them tools to equip them to work with, as I say, players who are going to demand a lot of them, looking for decisions, looking to challenge them verbally and potentially physically, looking to work with the challenges of parent spectators. I don't think there's a more demanding group of spectators than parent spectators. You know, if you go in front of 60 or 70,000, you can't hear those voices and you can't pick out those individual sort of, you know, bits of abuse verbally or whatever. Whereas when you are a young referee, you know, you can be 14 and qualify as a match official in this country. And, you know, when you're that young, you know, and you're trying to start out, it's not just the players on the pitch that are developing in youth football, it's the referees too. And I don't think that's often, you know, taken into account. I think a lot of people are just expecting the referee to turn up and get every single thing right immediately, and there's no space or growth for them to learn and develop. So really just trying to help them with that and deal with those pressures that are going to come their way when they're out in the middle.
You know, what's funny is that everything that you just said is such a universal truth, I think, not only on your side of the world, but on our side as well. You know, as a baseball umpire myself, everything that you just said, I think translates perfectly. You know, when we train young officials, the first thing we say is that you are expected to begin perfect and then improve, which is a complete impossibility. And on top of that, what you said about parents could not be more true. I mean, and I've been doing this for almost 15 years now, and the parents can be the worst of the bunch, worse than coaches and other players and just general fans sometimes. And I know plenty of other officials who have quit because of stuff like that. And I imagine that is something that your training is meant to curb in a way, to say that, you know, with the proper resilience and with the proper mental toughness, so to speak,
you
know, you can overcome this and you can really be the best official that you can be, which is something that we need in all sports, whether it's football, as you call it, as we call it soccer over here, because we're weird like that. But it doesn't matter the sport. The number of officials, the number of referees is decreasing very, very quickly. And it seems like your organization is one that will help stop that by providing those officials with the tools that they need to succeed and to grow.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, look, we in England, in the English FA alone, we have roughly between 28 and 31,000, it fluctuates, referees. But we've taken a big hit this year with the pandemic. A lot of referees have decided not to reaffiliate, not to continue refereeing, you know, for certainly this period that we're in now.
Of course.
Because obviously, you know, today, as we speak, Tuesday the 8th of December, we have the first vaccination here taking place. But we're at the start of a long journey with that. And I think that, you know, until people who are potentially vulnerable have got that, then I think that's going to really affect referee numbers. So one of my big sort of selling points when I'm saying, you know, you should work with me to the county FAs is, look, I want to help your retention, you know, because we are losing around 7,000 of those referees every year on average. And that's been the average for the last 10 seasons. Wow. But what we're losing is we're losing operators at a good level, semi-professional level, even bordering on professional level, because of the abuse and a lot of the demands on the game that have changed. And what we're replacing them with is roughly the same figure. But as I touched on before, you know, we're replacing them with young people who may be doing it for a specific school award or whatever it might be, that they're taking up refereeing. But they need time to learn. They need time to grow. They can't just come in at the level that the ones that have departed the game have. And so that's the big challenge that I think we have to face. But yeah, as you said, you know, mental toughness, I'm a mental toughness practitioner, and resilience, they're the two key watchwords within my business, absolutely. And they're all things that, you know, they're skills that can be improved as any skill can be, whether that be handwriting or kicking a football. Resilience and mental toughness are things that they're on a scale that we can develop and learn.
As I'm reading your story about your beginnings and whatnot that you sent me, I'm highlighting a bunch of different parts of it, and I was empathizing so much because of your vulnerability to discuss anxiety that you've dealt with. The stories that you told were hitting home, because I know I have felt, I would say, I don't know if I could say 100% the same way, but within 90% the same way. You just to touch on one or two, you talked about levels of OCD where you were pouring boiling water on plates and cutlery because you were concerned with getting sick, and I was reading that and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, that's me too. That is me too. I can't say that I poured boiling water, but I can say that I have done similar things like avoiding meals, period, because of the exact same reason. And what you described, I think, is the perfect precursor to explain why you ended up doing this as what you're doing. So talk a little bit about your upbringing through and experience through this anxiety, and then and lead us into the events that took you from being just a soccer referee, or I'm sorry, a football referee. I have to get that right. To eventually the event that we'll get to that kind of spurned this this whole thing started.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and I've written about this in a piece that I did for Mental Health Week, and that was back in May. It's a global thing, and it's a great thing. And what I've done through the third team is I'd shared a story from the Mental Health Foundation each day of the week, culminating to I do a weekly blog, and in the weekly blog, I wanted to make the weekly blog solely dedicated to my story. So I shared other people's stories throughout the week, coming into my story. So basically, when I was a young boy, I had a lot of anxiety, and I was very, very unhappy for a lot of the early years when it came to leaving the family unit and doing the things that I think a lot of people, maybe listening to this, have got children or whatever, those things that they do with the children, so you bring your children up, and then it's time for them to come to nursery, or is it kindergarten that they call it in the US? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's time for that moment, and then they go into school, and I, I have vivid memories of things more than I've written in that piece. When I started that nursery or kindergarten, I had a real attachment problem in terms of leaving and actually immersing myself within the other group of children, and then obviously what I have written in the piece there, and how I start the piece about traffic. Used to get a big problem with traffic, would feel real anxiety, feel real stress. Used to have to get my mother to hold my hand, when I'm sort of 5 years old, maybe around that age, maybe a little bit younger, and it was a real problem for me. And I think that things started to get recognised at school. People saying, well, he doesn't play in the same way. Observations of things like that, and these were a lot of challenges that I had throughout my education. So if I kind of fast forward to my time in secondary school, where I'd been a relatively active participant in school life at primary school level, and when I come into secondary school, which I believe it'd be high school, wouldn't it, in the US, and when we had that time, I went from being relatively comfortable and things, and that transition to that next level was quite a shock for me, and I found it really, really difficult. And I ended up having no friends at the start of that, the first year of that, that school, and it just happened to be that I managed to pick up one friend, and then you pick up another group of friends, and all of a sudden, I actually ended up being one of the most popular kids in the school. We had the yearbook at the end of the year, and that, they voted me. I think they voted me most changed. I think they voted me something to do with my smile, best smile, or something like that. So, no, I was absolutely delighted, obviously, that I'd been able to make an impression upon, basically classmates and people as well. And it made a big, big difference to me. But what actually happened as I was leading into my GCSEs, sort of the big exams that you would take here before you left the secondary school or high school, was I had a number of assessments and things, and they looked at me and they said, well, look, you have you're on the autistic spectrum, you have a lot of challenges that fit with that, but we can't say that you're definitively one thing or another. So that was like a good thing for me because it helped me get extra time, but it was a means to an end. It was to help me get extra time in exams. It didn't help me understand who I was as a person, and so that then, I suppose, probably the best way to put that is to say that I went to sixth form after that, and that made a big impression on me, because it meant that I couldn't do exams really once I'd got past a certain level. I didn't have the ability to get thoughts down into sort of exam work and things like that, and that made it really, really difficult for me. So I ended up doing progressive learning throughout so you'd be continually examined through your spell. So I went down that road instead of doing a subject and then one big examination at the end of it. And I really, really did well actually at sixth form, because I adapted after a difficult 2 or 3 months. I adapted really, really well for my 2 years there, and I was actually able to use that experience to help me when I decided to go to university afterwards. And really, that's where we hit on exactly what you're talking about. I'm from the northeast of England, and probably the best known city probably in America in the northeast of England is Newcastle. So if you imagine that, then I went to another city which I'm sure is very, very well known in America. Manchester is where I moved to for university. So I'd adapted pretty well, and I'd been able to make friends again, and I felt really, really good in that respect. And I had a really good time when I initially moved to Manchester. It was a new city, new place, bit of a culture shock, in terms of, coming into an environment where the public of the area was a lot more diverse than what you would see. There was a lot more of them. The population was significantly greater. I was living right in the city centre. And it was a big, kind of thing for me that I would end up basically being in that position where I was like, wow, this is a whole new city. I'm a young boy. I must have been 18. And it just really, really opened my eyes, because what I saw was, things that you would never see probably in the Northeast. And it's not, we're not a sort of closed area up here. It's just, there's more, because I see it now as really the second city to London, and the mentality and the pace of life is very much that of London, which links perfectly into the point that I'm making. Up to Christmas, I was doing probably quite well, didn't come back that much, didn't think too much of it, but then I found it really, really difficult. When we talk about pace of life, I've grown up about 20 minutes from the city, a big city, in the northeast of England. But when I open the curtains in the morning, I see fields, and I see trees. And for me to wake up in the morning in Manchester, to open up my curtains to see a big concrete jungle, flyovers and advertising boards, and everything that you would expect to see in a city, but also the fact that I saw. Well, a great example of this is one morning I saw, I opened the curtains 8 o'clock in the morning, and there was like a canal in front of where the accommodation that I was living in was. And on the other side of this canal was a man, and he's got a big, long overcoat on and nothing else. He's completely naked underneath. And the coat is open and you can see. But what you can really see is needles and syringes hanging out of his arms and his feet and all sorts. And that was a typical sight when you ventured into the city, particularly in the evening. And so for me, somebody who's grown up in a sort of semi-rural environment, to go into that and to feel that, it was a very, very threatening thing. And then obviously, you just touched on it before, and I bring it round to that. This started to have a really detrimental effect on my mental health and well-being. And I got into a place where, as you say, I just didn't want to get ill. I didn't want anything to go wrong. I wanted to be I suppose the word really is paranoid about making sure that everything was going perfectly and everything was going right, that I didn't have any weakness or show any weakness, because really the irony is I didn't have any weakness. I didn't want to have any weakness, but it was because I felt so vulnerable. And I think that that was the reason why I was doing things like sterilizing by pouring boiling water over cutlery and plates and all sorts. And the only thing I feel truly grateful for is the fact that even though I was doing it, I could recognize from a sort of third party, third eye type thing that I was actually, that this was not wrong. This was wrong, that this was not healthy behavior. And it actually did allow me to have some sort of view on it, but I knew that it still wasn't right, and that it was very, very difficult for me to go through that period. And then, just as you say, I came away from that after a year, because I had a really terrible 6 months after Christmas where I was really hanging on, and I wanted to finish the year and have a nice round off, but I was really struggling, and I was coming back to the Northeast every weekend after that, because it, the best way I've described it in the past is it was like through the week in Manchester I was holding my breath and I could breathe and be normal and be me when I was back in the Northeast on the weekends. And then that was a big thing for me. So I walked away from that at the end of the first year, and that was kind of the end of my education, really, in any formal sense, and certainly in full-time education anyway. And I then had a period where I was doing some volunteering with my mother's company, and I was doing some volunteering with some other people that I knew through the small business community in the Northeast, but all the time looking for a job, and all the time looking for something to do to try and build a career, really. And it was something that, I was just going to fall into a career, really, like I think so many do. And eventually, after 14 months, something came up. Actually, funnily enough, two things came up. I was offered two jobs at once. So I'd gone 14 months of no's and rejections and all sorts. And then I got two offers. And I still don't regret to this day taking the road that I did take. But as I'm here now and I've set up my own business, it won't take a genius to work out that it didn't work out. And I was actually in that job that I took in September, October 2018. I was in that job for 7 weeks, and I came to the point where, again, I needed to reevaluate everything I've just touched on. So I came through the door, and I was very naive. I'd never been in a workplace. I'd never had any ideas about what this might involve or what this kind of life might be. And just came in, and I was constantly observing, looking around. How does he do that? How does she do this? Trying to understand the behaviors of the workplace and what was expected and all those things, that I think is pretty normal for a young person. Just as time went by, first couple of weeks went by, and, I'm trying to learn the rules and the demands of the job and all the things like that. And then one day I get this really, really weird encounter from the departmental boss. So not my line manager, but the departmental boss, who just said to me, Nathan, I don't like the way that you're looking. I don't like the way that you're the way that you're moving here. I don't like the way that you have this aura about you. And I thought, this is really strange. This is not a normal criticism or a legitimate criticism. But I just said, look, okay, sorry, I'll do whatever I'll do about it, and we move on. And then another couple of weeks later, you have a meeting where everybody in the business would have a meeting with their direct line manager. So my line manager was having a meeting with the departmental boss. And I got a message, okay, do you want to come in? So I come in, and I was actually living probably about 30 miles away from where this business was based. And a couple of times I came in probably a little bit after we needed to start. So I just said, look, we need to have clear line of communication here, okay? I know it's not ideal. Maybe traffic was really bad, things like that. But I'll make the time and we'll make sure that there's no problem. And then it wasn't really good enough for them. But I thought my attitude was spot on. Another thing was which I found absolutely outrageous was he went, I don't like the way you sit at your desk. And I just didn't get that at all. And then there was a couple of other little nitpicking things that were just not quite right. And then another week or two later, maybe just before the end, the departmental boss sat quite close to us in the office, and he just went, for context here, I don't drink alcohol, and I was working for a gambling company. So that's the sort of the little bit of the point that I need to make before I say this. He just said to me, he said, Nathan, you don't drink, you don't gamble. What do you do? And that was a really, really insulting thing that actually probably I should have brought up at the end, but I didn't, and that's a regret that I'll hold. But it was a clear agenda against me. My face didn't fit. The departmental boss was clearly unhappy with my line manager for bringing me into the organisation. He didn't like me at all. And got called in a week later. Nathan, we want you to move on. Not a problem, because I don't really want to be in this toxic environment, this culture anyway. So it suited all parties. And it was just one of those things that I think was an absolutely horrific experience for somebody to have their first job. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. And it was the real spark for what happened. But actually, I got let go on a Monday. And on the Sunday before that, the game I officiated, which was the spark for the third team to really come to life, took place. So actually I had a really horrific 2 days, if I'm being totally honest, because what happened in the game was, it was a game where it was a really freezing cold Sunday morning, 25th of November 2018, and we were doing a game, and it came in about 79, 80 minutes, maybe 81 minutes. There was about 10 minutes left for sure. And it was about 9-1, I think, at the time. And we were in the centre of the field, and we came round in a sort of a loop, and I was blocked, but I heard a shout, and then I became unblocked, and there's two guys sort of head to head with each other. So I'm then looking at this thinking, oh, there's going to be a confrontation here. What I didn't expect was that there would be a headbutt this is from a player who's on the winning team, by the way, a headbutt of an opponent, and then before as the guy was recoiling from the headbutt, he gives him a big swing with a left fist, and this guy is knocked out, but he's actually having a fit before he hits the ground. So I'm then on my own, I'm not working with assistants here. This is actually a youth football game, and I've got a decision to make. Do I go towards the player who's just been assaulted on the football pitch, or do I go towards the offender who's now walking off the field of play into the parent spectators? So I look at it and I see parent spectators rushing on to the aid of the victim. So I then decide to go through the process of basically dismissing this player, but obviously it clearly needed more than that. And this was exceptional misconduct in the most blatant and obvious terms. And I took the name and everything, and I said, look, you better get away, because I was really concerned that being on my own, that the two sets of parent spectators would turn on each other and I would have a brawl of about 40 or 50 people. And that's the last thing that you want when you're on your own and somebody's actually having a fit on the ground because they're being physically assaulted. So I got rid of him, literally. He left the area, and I'm absolutely certain to this day that was the right thing to do. The ambulance came and said, look, we can speed the police up here for you. We can get in touch with the control room at the emergency services, and we can get this quicker. So they did, and the police came, but everybody had gone by the time this had happened, because the ambulance came for the young man. The young man had to have brain scans. He had to have all sorts, because it was really, really a serious situation, and there was certainly fear for his mental capacity and all sorts of things like that, with such a severe reaction to being punched. As we know, one punch can kill, and there's just no doubt about that. So we had the police there, and forensics was taken on the pitch and all sorts of things like that. And then the police said, look, will you come to the police station with us? We need to take basically your account of what's happened. You're the person responsible for what's happened here. We need to take that into account. So I went there and obviously helped the police with that by giving them the full picture and helping that. And it just shocked me, but the adrenaline on the day got me through the day. The next day I was having flashbacks during the day. Now the next day also was the day that the company decided to get rid of me. So I'd been having quite intrusive thoughts. I'd been having flashbacks. It was really unpleasant. I'd seen a lot of trouble in football through refereeing, because I'd been refereeing for 3 or 4 seasons by that stage. But nothing had a reaction like that in my mind. And I wasn't dealing with the mental consequences of that. And the anguish really is what it was. And I didn't really necessarily get the support. And I think that's through one or two different ways. And that's another big factor for me. With the third team now, it's something I'm deeply passionate about, is making sure that as an official you have as many lines of support as possible, and you identify what those lines of support are, so that if one fails, there's another to back it up. But if that one fails, there's another to back that up, because I always think that it's really, really important. I went through that experience alone, and it really, really hurt me for a little while. But luckily, again, we come to resilience, we come to mental toughness. I'm quite resilient and I'm quite mentally tough. So I was actually able to compartmentalize that and put it behind me. But yes, the job was lost, and I then decided to take time. A number of people in my family had suggested to me, Nathan, look, you've got this autism diagnosis that you've had for about 4 or 5 years now. You need to do something about this. So actually I thought, right, okay, yeah, no, that's fair, and I did. And I was able to seek out a really great guy who helped me in a big way, local guy in the Northeast. And he actually, I worked with him for about 3 or 4 months on a weekly basis for 2-3 hours a week on, understanding autism, bringing it to the relevance of me, and then actually being able to appreciate what is my personality traits and what is what autism is responsible for, in effect. And that changed my life. The best way I can describe that is if you have a television and you've got a lot of wires behind it, and all those wires are tangled, and it's like untangling all those wires and having really clear lines in. And it really, really changed everything for me, and it allowed me a lot of I was able to step back and to understand things that had happened right at the very start, as I touched on there, when I was a very small boy, things that had happened throughout my school career, things that happened when I was at university, just really everything that had happened in my life up to that point. And it allowed me to make changes to accommodate and account for this autism. And now that I knew what it was and what it entailed, it brought me a lot more inner peace, happiness, and it was a lot more, this is who I am, and I can accept who I am, and I understand enough about me. It was like an awakening for me. So it really, really helped me a lot. And then somebody said to me, look, you've got something here. And I really struggled to visualize what it was, it being the third team. But, little by little, I had help from people in the small business community. I had help from a mentor with autism training, who'd helped me a lot with that. And we set the business up, and I started to see what was real in terms of possibilities, and in terms of helping people with mental health and helping people with mental toughness and resilience. And yeah, we're, 18, 19 months down the line now, and I'm absolutely delighted with the progress we're making in spite of the global pandemic that we face. We've been able to keep going, been able to keep helping people, been able to keep working forwards, and I'm absolutely delighted about that. So, yeah, I suppose that really hopefully answers your question in a long-winded way, but yeah.
It does, but it was a completely necessary answer in order to provide the context behind it, because we've all had, stories very much like that. I know my story is, again, if someone were to ask me the same thing, I would probably give very similar responses in that, I would have to go, down one road in order to explain how I got to the next road, which is exactly what you did. A quick question before we move on. You said that this football game was a youth football game that sparked this. How old were these kids that eventually headbutted and punched and whatnot?
It was under 16s, so I think that at that time there would have been a mixture of 15 and 16-year-old boys.
Wow. So I mean, it seems like this can be something of a universal thing, in that it's not, we kind of have, in the United States, there's obviously a focus on, our national sports and whatnot, and we don't seem to go too far into the global arena, so to speak, outside of perhaps football, I think, and golf, I'm sure, as well. But it seems like it's fair to say that the incidents that we see stateside are universal, and that there are people worldwide who experience the same thing. It's that, whether you are a player, a coach, a fan, an official, a member of the media, we all see the same type of poor behavior, hopefully not as much, but it does exist. This is not a problem that is solely reserved for just us over here in North America. This is a global thing that if you have faced it, there are people worldwide who have faced it.
Absolutely. And I think that, one of the things that I often say is that sport mirrors society. The people who play sport are members of society. So really we have situations, I know that to be 100% clear, there has been a direct correlation between, we had a political referendum in this country in 2016, which changed the course of the future that we're going down. And there's a charity which deals with discrimination and racism in this country called Kick It Out. And they commissioned a survey which basically showed that instances of discrimination, racism, sexism, homophobia had increased since that political referendum. We've noticed that assaults between players and on officials has increased in that period of time. And I think that when these things happen on a much grander scale, well beyond sport, the ramifications of that and the impact that it has on society is felt on the football pitch. And we as officials almost made responsible for that. In society, the police will apply the laws. In football, referees apply the laws. And that's why ultimately we do end up being like law enforcement officers to an extent, because what is going on in society is coming onto the football pitch, is coming onto the baseball field, is coming onto the American football field, is coming onto whatever arena it is, and people are being deeply, deeply affected because, you cannot measure the impact that being a victim of an assault or even witnessing an assault will have, because, we have Sean here, we have you, Jack. Each of us three could have a very, very different feeling about what we've seen, and it will mean something different, and it'll have a different impact upon each of us, because we all have different levels of tolerance. We all have different levels of mental toughness. We all have different levels of mental well-being and all these things. And I think that things like that, unfortunately, we want that tide to turn. We don't want things to continue getting worse, but that's where we are at. That's where we are at the moment, unfortunately.
And Jack and I talk about, when we, it's all about perspective too, like our experiences growing up.
Yeah.
When it comes to those sorts of situations, what we say at OSIP, we say that sportsmanship doesn't only apply to the player, it applies to the coach,
absolutely,
the referee, the fans, the media. It's all about educating all facets of all those demographics about good sportsmanship and how they can then turn it and apply it to each other. So, and Jack and I say this all the time. Often the ones who need to hear about good sportsmanship the most are the ones who are not going to listen, right? So we have to apply, and Jack, you can agree with this, of course. We have to hope that someone will set a good example for someone else, and that's how you get the ball rolling.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that. And from personal experience, I think you talk about perspective and whatnot. We lack. I shouldn't say it this way. Let me say it a different way. Certain people, when they bring that onto the field, onto the pitch, onto whatever, they for whatever reason dismiss the perspective of the other person. Yeah. And there are certain to provide a corollary example, we have certain laws in the United States when you get into a personal injury lawsuit or a car accident or anything like that, where you take the victim as they are. So if you cause a car accident and you happen to hit someone who already has a significant disability, even a mental disability or something that has affected them mentally, where you can't necessarily see it symbolically through a cast or crutches or anything like that, you take that into account when as you go through the case, because what you've done is you've altered a person's way of life, who's already on a particular path. You can't just dismiss that and say, well, I hit somebody in a car. It doesn't matter if that person had been traumatized by a previous experience. In certain parts of this country, that does matter. And the same thing applies here as a sports official, in that if a player causes an incident, regardless of the sport, the official who may be assigned to work that game could have a previous experience that causes said official to react in a certain way. But more than likely, what it does is it might cause the trauma, the mental trauma, the flashbacks, all of those things to intensify and affect the official moving forward. To give an example from my life, in the summer of, I believe it was 2014, don't quote me on that. I'm sure that there are millions of people looking into my life as we speak, and I don't want to upset those people. But I believe it was that summer, I was working for a different league of baseball, and we were servicing teams that were divided into two divisions. One division was, I think, 15 to 19-year-old boys and men, and another division, I think, was 19 to about 24-year-olds. And the number of incidents that I had that summer that involved disqualifications, we call them ejections, incidents that, where someone wanted to either get into an argument or even potentially a physical fight, And the worst was when I actually had to terminate games to say, we cannot play this game anymore because of the threat that we feel due to violence or something similar. That increased so significantly. And the number of times that happened, by the end of that summer, I was so distraught. I was having those types of feelings and those emotional reactions that made me wonder, why am I doing this? I can't keep doing this. This is lunacy. This is insane that I keep thinking I'll go back out there and work for another small amount of money in order to continue to officiate a baseball game when I know that or from my experience, there's a probability that seems to be increasing that I may have to call the police to have them come by and protect me as I, change out of my uniform and my equipment at my car. And that is such a shame. And I think that speaks to what the third team does is, you build resilience, you build mental toughness, you provide the resources, the examples, the exercises to officials specifically, but I imagine to many other people as well, to say, this is how we can get through this. And it may not be feasible to say to them, stop doing this, because as Sean said, the people who need it the most aren't the ones who are not the ones who will listen. Yeah. So instead you empower the people who will listen to survive this and to get to the other side. Is that an accurate way to summarize it or to explain it?
Yeah, I totally agree, because I think it doesn't matter. I think in your example there, players did not see you as a human being.
Yeah,
they saw the badge that you were wearing, and they looked at you as an authority figure. They did not recognize the color of your hair, your eyes, whatever it might be, as a human feature. They saw the badge, they saw authority, and they wanted to challenge authority. And I think that's the real challenge that you have, and I think that's why we need to protect officials, because you said it there. You contemplated walking away. We're talking with everybody we work with, really, not just county football associations in this country and other football associations in other countries. We're talking with Scotland and Wales and FAI and Ireland and all those things. We're not just talking about referee retention. We're talking about, giving these people the tools. When I talk about me being a mental toughness practitioner and having that qualification, I apply that to people in workplaces. I apply that to young people in education, where we go in, we work with them, we give them, when you have young people in education, they've got very much got societal pressures on them as well. They've got exams coming up, massive pressure, peer pressure. Do you want to drink some alcohol? Do you want to take some drugs? Pressure from parents. Are you applying yourself enough? Are you doing your homework? Are you revising? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Massive pressure on young people. And in this country as well, there was another report commissioned which showed that since 2004, instances of childhood depression have gone up by 45%. Now, that hit me hard anyway, but it hit me even harder when I realized that really that's talking about my generation when I was at school. And it really, those are the people I went to school with. These are the people around me. These are the people I associate myself with, and who I am one of. So that really spoke to me, and it really hit me hard. And so that's one of the reasons why we do that. But also working in businesses, you see the amount of people on long-term ill health, leave. They're on what you would call on the sick, but they're on long-term ill health because somebody has actually said, look, we're going to pile a load of pressure on you, and then somebody else, we're going to pile a load of pressure on you, we're going to pile it all. teams not working effectively. So this then comes back to sport. So we're talking about an office. You might have an office with an insurance company where one person in a team is taking on a much higher workload than everyone else and is almost carrying the team. And eventually it takes too much and their mental well-being suffers and they break down and they have depression and all these terrible sort of mental ill health challenges as a result of that. So it's about getting teams to work more effectively. It's about getting managers to understand better how they can work with employees and understand them again as human beings, not just quote the handbook, the staff handbook, and say, you've missed X, Y, and Z days. We're going to investigate you with human resources. Actually looking at them and saying, if it's you, Jack, me being your boss, actually saying, look, Jack, tell me what's going on. How can I help? And having that mindset. And so, the third team is not just about sport, but it's amazing how much you can bring it back to sports. We talk about people in businesses working in teams. How can we manage teams best and get that workload spread so that everybody is pulling in the same direction and not one person being held down?
So it is, in essence, whether you're talking about sports, whether you're talking about schools, whether you're talking about businesses, it is a message to say that the people involved, regardless of the role, are not just assets. They're not just machines. They're not just things that you can control one way or the other, where you put in a particular input and you expect a certain output. We need to have empathy to understand that one way is not the only way, that we can make adjustments, we can make certain changes, we can seek to understand more about a person, in order to make them work more effectively and make the team work more effectively, rather than just go about it this old way. Because those, doesn't, like you said, it doesn't matter if it's a business, it doesn't matter if it's school, it doesn't matter if it's sports. There are elements of the team involved in all of them, and there are elements of sportsmanship that deal with this in all of them, that speak to mental toughness, resiliency, and essentially empathy, to understand that these are human beings who are working in this machine.
And you know what, Jack, you bring up a good point, because in the United States, at least, there's a severe lack of mental disorder awareness. People just think that they look on the outside to find problems, and for a lot of people, that's not the case. So, Nathan, I don't know what it's like in England, but do you see that same sort of lack of mental disorder awareness?
Oh, I'll tell you what I see, if I'm being totally honest. I see a massive disparity between my generation and I use that, you talk about millennials, you talk about different generations and things like that. I think probably within my generation, probably up to people who are about 30, 35 now, there is a big difference between that age bracket and then the people above them and the previous generations that's gone before, in terms of the attitudes that we have. And I think that what I'm really proud and really pleased of with the general society is that my generation is pushing so hard. And obviously now we're coming to an age where we're in our 20s and we're in our 30s, my generation, and we're really pushing really hard to make this be on the agenda, to make it happen. And it is making a big difference, because we're now seeing, Prince William running a fantastic charity called Heads Together, which obviously he has the profile and he has the ability to be able to get onto television a lot. He set up a program within the Heads Together campaign called Every Mind Matters. And that's really important. That works with the National Health Service here, which we're very lucky to have, where they are pushing really hard. They have advertising space on television. So it's not just about him being able to actually give these talks and get involved with this. We had it in football as well. He's the He's the president. He's the president of the Football Association, Prince William. And in the third round of the FA Cup, which is the one where the Premier League and the Championship teams come in January last year, every kickoff was 1 minute after you would expect it to be. So it'd be 1 minute past 3 or 1 minute, 31 minutes past 12. And that was to say 1 minute to think about mental health before we kick off this game.
That's great.
They gave the name of the FA Cup final to the sponsors are Emirates at the moment, the airline, and actually what they've done is given that up and said, look, we're going to call it the Heads Together FA Cup final instead of the Emirates FA Cup final. So I'm really, really pleased with the work that we're doing that. And obviously that FA Cup final, it's like the equivalent of the Super Bowl in America. That's something that everybody across the world's looking at, the English FA Cup final. Everybody wants to see that. So I think we're doing great work in this country. There's so much more to do. This pandemic has caused a lot of trouble for mental health, and it continues to cause a lot of trouble, and we have to be very, very careful. We have to monitor very closely to make sure that we don't have a second pandemic, which is a mental health pandemic, because we are closer than we'd like to think on that. And I hope that we can get the tide turned on the actual health and the viral pandemic in time, that people can get back to normality soon enough so that they're not badly affected. But it's something that I have a lot of optimism about going forward in the future, when hopefully my generation, when there's a prime minister who's my age, when all these things go forward in time, I'm very, very optimistic about the future. And I think that things are going to change, and I think things are starting to change. But again, bad things like a pandemic can happen, and they can have an absolutely drastic effect on mental health and well-being. And we've always got to be guarding against that.
As someone who is 37 years old, I don't know if I should be happy or sad, depending upon which group you want to put me in. I guess the good news is that I may be physically 37, but Sean, you can attest to this. I really am mentally about 12 years old.
Yeah.
So I think we're both there. Okay. So we're saying,
come with us, Jack. You can come with us. You can come.
I'm all right. I'm on your team. That's it. I'm in. Do you think that there is anything specific? I mean, I know we talked about mental health. We talked about a wide range of things. Is there anything else that you can point to specifically, either on the behavior or the points of a player, of a coach, of a fan, of a member of the media, that is a catalyst to exacerbate some of this behavior that we haven't touched on? Is there anything else that we need to be aware of outside of just this general societal thing? Like I think, at least on our side of the world, and it could very well be the same over there, there is an element of competition that I think drives some of the similar problems over here, because obviously we live in a fully capitalist society. We understand that our economy is driven by competition, and I think that in a vacuum, that's a very good thing for us. The problem that may exist, though, is where we take competition to a level where it becomes very immoral, where we're making decisions and we're doing things that may not be illegal, may not be against the law, but they are very detrimental and they're very hurtful. Do you find anything like that, or anything else that we didn't talk about yet, that needs to be addressed so that either your mission becomes easier or almost becomes non-existent because the goal has been achieved? I mean, Sean and I say this all the time. The goal of our organization is to not exist so that we don't have to do what we do. Is there anything else that kind of points to something like that from your end of things?
Look, I don't know, Jack, but I think that, and I don't know what the situation is with officials of all sports in America, but if I talk about football, our national sport, soccer as you would call it, if you look at the list of Premier League referees, okay, you will see that there is maybe, I think the list consists of about 25 referees, maybe 30, but there's one or two that are from below the Midlands. in this country, and the rest are from the north or the Midlands, but mainly the north. That is where the bulk of your officials comes from. And I think that really, to be honest, the only way that you can really evaluate is that it's a lot tougher in the north of the country, where obviously I come from as well. So it's a funny thing, and I think that, again, without getting obviously into the real whys and wherefores, I think what you'll see is that even within an area within a county within the northeast of England, you will have areas of affluence and you will have areas of socio-economic deprivation. And that when you referee a team which is coming from an area of socio-economic deprivation, you're going to be in for a tougher game than you are from an affluent area. And I think that's the same the world over, I would imagine.
Yes.
What I'm saying, yeah. So what I'm saying is that you have that, but then I think that, when I find that statistic about the pool of referees very, very interesting, because it shows a level of mental toughness to get to the very, very top, and a level of resilience to get to the very, very top. But really, what we're saying, that it comes from the grassroots of you're refereeing in tough leagues where you're having to really, really work hard, use all your management skills. You have to hone them. You either sink or swim, and you have that toughness, and it takes you right to the very top. And I think that that's probably one of the big things, geography. I think that generally in the north, obviously the powerhouse of England and the UK is Parliament in London, and then everybody knows that. And so the north is a long way from that, and it feels very detached, and I think there's some resentment and all sorts of things that go on. But really what it cuts down to is that whole thing, where it affects us as sports officials, is the socio-economic areas and the interesting lessons that we can learn from that.
It's so funny that you say that, because I see it over here with regard to baseball officials. When we can compare it on a micro or a macro level. In my neck of the woods, I live in a relatively well-off area. Sometimes I feel out of place with that, but there are places, 10, 15, 20 minutes down the road that are not as well off. And when you work a game in that area, it is a different environment than when you work a game in my area. And it speaks exactly to that. And then on a larger scale, if you look at baseball, for example, as it pertains to North America, you can see that, especially as you go into Central and South America too, the officials who work solely in, let's say, the United States and Canada are of a different set of experiences than those who might work specifically in, say, Latin America. The officials who have spent time working in the Dominican Republic or in Puerto Rico or in Venezuela, and all of those areas that might be a bit more impoverished and whatnot, they come out with a different level of experience. Perhaps we could call it resiliency, that makes it different. And there is something to that. So your observation is spot on. It's not just in England, it is worldwide. Yeah. So there is something to that.
Jack, you mentioned the capitalism and the culture of competition in our country, and you're right. It can get pretty draconian, especially on the field. I mean, you've told me the stories of you having to eject parents,
yes,
from games because of how fierce the competition from their eyes was, and how does that reflect on their kids?
Yeah,
so it can be what you ejected one parent who said, what did he say? I could be home watching.
Yeah, I was just going to tell that story. Is that Nathan? You will appreciate this story as a golf fan. this was in either my first or second year of officiating, and I was assigned to work a championship game between two teams that were 13-year-old boys. And it was so like the boys on the field were like, they couldn't care less. They were lost. They were, whether they were having fun. They were not invested in the same way that the adults were. The coaches were bad. The parents were bad. And it got to a point where my partner, who I was working with, had ejected somebody before I even had to. And I had to make a call at first base. That was a very close play. It went against one team, obviously, as these calls do. And a parent stood up and said, why don't you just go home if you don't want to be out here? To me, saying because apparently I was the reason that this person's son's team was losing and whatnot. And so I ejected him from halfway across the field. I pointed to him in the stands all the way over there, and I said, all right, you're out of here. And he goes and he stands up and he starts walking away down the stands and away, and he goes, and this is where Sean will mark the episode as mature. He will say, good, I'll go home and watch golf instead of having to watch this shit. And I said I turned to my partner as this guy's leaving, and I said, I don't even think golf is on today. Because it was a Saturday in May. I think they were running the Kentucky Derby that day. And I was like, I just don't think that golf would put a major tournament up against the Kentucky Derby. That's just me. Now, they probably had some low-level tournament going on that, Phil Mickelson and Tiger Woods were not participating in, but still, it made for one of the greatest stories of a disqualification of a fan.
But it just goes to show you, right? That fan could be a parent, and that parent was setting a bad example for every single person on that field and off that field.
Yeah.
As an adult.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the dangers of this, that sportsmanship can affect fans and parents. So I guess my question for you, Nathan, is does your organization, I know you educate various people outside of the context of sports, but within the context of sports, do you also educate participants, coaches, managers, parents as well?
No, I don't. But I think it's really interesting that we have worked with various different staff members within county FAs, but not with the parents. But I think one of the things that probably I would say is interesting is that FIFA decided to change the laws. I think it was last year, not this year, and they basically extended the cautions and dismissals, yellow and red cards, to club officials. So a manager or a physiotherapist or whoever it might be could also be dealt with in that manner. And I think that really helps a lot of the younger referees to actually have to challenge this behavior, because they can, although it's not great practice, if this person is being so abusive and so challenging, they can literally just go over, get the name, wave the card in their face and get rid of them. And I think that's part of the problems that I had when I was starting at grassroots level doing youth football, was the fact that, I remember one game I sent off the manager and his two coaches, and I was then left with a problem that I'd actually sent off everybody that was responsible for that one team.
I've done that.
I had to make a decision on what I was going to do. So I had to allow one of them to stay because they needed to have somebody to be responsible for the children. So I think that can be a real problem, and it takes gumption to actually do that. So I can completely empathize with you, and what I can also say is that, look, FIFA helped the referees in football, but who's helping the umpires in tennis, or who's helping whoever it might be in various different sports to actually deal with these situations and to empower the officials to do something about it in a correct and proper manner.
I think one of the great things, though, is that even though per se you may not be working directly with parents, coaches, fans, and media, by empowering the officials and by offering your services to schools and businesses and whatnot, you are essentially still doing that, because by empowering the officials, first of all, you are empowering the people who will listen to you, and you're tilting the scales in their favor. But by working with the schools and the businesses, those entities are made up of the people who are the players, the coaches, the fans, and the media. So it's an indirect way, but it's still working.
Yeah, and as an athlete, you're always on stage, right?
Right.
I mean, you're on stage on and off the field, because what you do off the field can reflect, your attitude in general. So
Right.
You got to be very careful.
We'd completely welcome it, though. I would completely welcome the introduction of, for example, potentially a laws of the game segment to coaching. So if somebody takes their coaching badges in the sport, that they could actually then get either an overview of the laws of the game, or even a conversation with the referee where they can say, look, we're bringing a referee in here. If you've got any questions or you want to understand anything, here's your moment.
Right.
And that really, really helps them. Even a little laws of the game test, a very basic one, I think would help them a lot. And I think that these are the things that we really want to do. I feel that there's something there, is there?
I got to tell you two quick stories about that. First of all, so I'm the president of our local baseball umpire association for the groups that service all of the secondary schools in this area. So all of the high schools and the middle schools and whatnot who have interscholastic baseball and softball, they utilize our organization. And last year, before the pandemic hit, so it was probably January, one of the things that we decided to do was we contacted all of the schools, and we said we're going to have a meeting. And at this meeting, we're going to have a number of our officials be there, and we want as many coaches, whoever, it doesn't matter, athletic directors, players, come on down.
Yeah.
It's free. It's easy. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the rules, because we have a different set of rules depending upon obviously what level of baseball and softball you play. So the biggest difference that we have here in the States is that the official baseball rules, what you see in Major League Baseball, has a chunk of differences from baseball that's played at the high school or secondary school level. And they can be minute, but if people don't know them, that's where conflict looms. And that's where coaches say, you got this wrong and blah, 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 blah. And we say, no, we didn't get this wrong. You don't know the rule difference. So we invited them all in. And I swear to you, not a single person showed up to this meeting other than the officials.
Wow.
And so the most I had was I had one coach email me about a day after the meeting, and he said, I'm sorry I couldn't make this meeting. Is there anything that you could send me that, for what I missed, this, that, the other? So I was happy to oblige this coach, but that was the sad thing is, and it's easy to feel discouraged, but at the same time, you have to keep fighting the good fight. And the other story I was going to tell that I think Sean was alluding to is that we have a number of people who have been evaluated, through by being tested on these rules and whatnot. And the manager of the New York Yankees, who is, they are obviously the brand of baseball that is known worldwide. They were one of two teams that came to England last year for the London series. Well, their manager, Aaron Boone, was given a test before this was years before he was even considered for this job. Mm-hmm. And he was a member of the media at the time. And it was a very informal test. They were just kind of seeing what people knew about the rules. And it was a 10-question test. He got 1 correct.
Wow.
So when he got the job to manage the New York Yankees, Sean called me up and said, well, what do you think of this? And I said, well, you remember the story I told you about how the guy who's now in charge went 1 for 10 in understanding the rules of the game. So it is, we're all, you, me, Sean, we're all on the same page when it comes to this stuff. It's a matter of trying to figure out how to get other people to understand that. And I think that leads me to my next question. What can the average person do to assist you and the third team achieve its goal or its mission? And how can that be applicable to everyone?
I think that really communication is key, and I talk about this an awful lot. It's a key aspect of being an official. We have to be good communicators, both verbally and non-verbally. And I think that that's one of the things that can really, really help everybody to achieve what they want to achieve. I think that referees, sometimes they have, so I speak about football referees in England in particular. They have this fear sometimes of letting the referee manager know that there is a problem, maybe with their mental well-being or whatever it might be. They don't want to show any weakness to that person because they know that person could have a say in whether they're promoted or not. And I think that that's why when I deliver the workshops, I say, look, that door's shut, okay? It's us in this room now. We're all referees. We all understand the challenges that we go through. We all know that there are things that we find more difficult than others that maybe even keep us awake at night. And I think that it's those things that being prepared to actually talk about them and being able to reframe that mindset to be able to say, do you know what, actually, I'm talking about something that I find very difficult. I'm not being weak. I'm being strong. This is a strength. This is an opportunity to develop. And so I think that really, it's not actually really so much about helping me as so much as helping yourself. Because if you are prepared to talk and you're prepared to have these conversations and to be able to get the advice that you need, which again is the third team we can provide, then you're giving yourself the best chance and we're helping you give yourself the best chance. And I think that comes from not just referees, but also from really everybody that we work with, being prepared to communicate, being prepared to say, actually, I find that quite difficult, or I didn't feel very good after I did that. And that's, I've been worried about that. And that's actually really caused me a problem. And being able to do those things, being able to help, each other by sharing those experiences. When I talk about that locked room, another referee sitting there, maybe feeling very, very nervous about being in this room. And why have they brought the third team in? There's nothing wrong with me and whatever. But actually they sit, they listen, other people engage, and it brings them into it. It brings them in. They might not get to a point where they're actually ready to stick their hand up and say, actually, do you know what? I felt this. But when we do the some little tasks within workshops, they might actually be prepared to write it down on a note. And then when the spokesperson for the table, that's why we strategically put them into tables of 5, so that we know that if there is somebody who's not confident in speaking about a challenge, that they might prepared to meet us in the middle almost and write it down on a note, and then have a spokesperson for their table that they're sitting on. And then their view, it does get aired and they don't just get left behind. So I think it's about things like that, and about promoting that and making it a positive thing and reframing a lot of mindsets, because if you want to become the next level of baseball official, you know what you've got to do, and you know the challenges that you've got to surmount to get that as well. And I think that it's the same with any officiating of any sport, really. You know what you've got to do. You know some of the challenges that you face where you might have a weakness that you need to improve on, or a challenge that you've struggled to deal with. And it's actually about having that strength and that ability to actually say, look, I'm struggling with this, and I'm going to put my hand up and I'm going to say, look, how can we help this and how can we work this forward? And I think that would kind of be my message.
I think that's the perfect place to pause and reflect on that, because the message of what you just said speaks beyond sports too. It takes a lot of bravery, vulnerability, however you want to label it, to be able to say, I'm having a problem. I would, when I was teaching students at the university level, regardless of what I was teaching them, I said the 3 hardest things to say in the English language are, I'm sorry, I need help, Worcester sauce. And we still struggle with the last one, but it's the God's honest truth that we as human beings have a problem saying some of those things, and to be able to be vulnerable, to be able to say, I got an issue with something and I need to talk about it, is probably one of the most brave things anyone can say, regardless of the context, whether it is something as stereotypical as an addiction, or it is someone who is a sports official looking for the resilience to overcome a bad experience and continue to do the job that they have been blessed to do. And I think that's the best way to put it. Before we wrap, Nathan, I'd like to give you the floor one more time. If there's anything else that you'd like to say, anything else you'd like to promote, we obviously know that the thirdteam.co.uk is the website. And although you are confined to England and Ireland and the kingdom there, I don't know if you would be able at this point to hop a flight and spread your message over here in the States yet, unless you pay the officials, as we talked about very early on, but what is there anything else you'd like to share, you'd like to say before we wrap it up?
No, definitely. I've had some really, really good comments and some really, really good feedback on the blog from some American soccer referees, and I'd absolutely love that to continue to grow. And obviously you mentioned the website there. If you go onto the website thirdteam.co.uk, and if you go to the bottom there, you can sign up to receive the Third Team blog directly to your email inbox. Every week it will be Friday at 5:00 GMT. So I don't know what that would be in your locality.
I think that would be the year 2002. If I'm doing okay,
graduated high school then.
Hey, remember those days when you had hair and you were good looking, Sean?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so you can reach us there, and obviously we're on Twitter at the Third Team, 3RD Team on Twitter, and on all the other things social, such as Facebook and Instagram. We are the Third Team. That is the name. We are the Third Team. And also catch us on LinkedIn. We're nearly at 1,000 followers on the LinkedIn page, so really excited about hitting that milestone.
That's fantastic, Nathan. I cannot thank you enough for spending some time with us. I'm so happy that the technology is available to do so. Yeah. Across such a large body of water that I don't think any of us want to swim across at any point in time. I'll apologize on behalf of us leaving and starting the 13 colonies many years ago from the get-go, just since we have the connection. But this has been fantastic. And I wish you, and Sean, I think I speak for you as well, I wish you and the third team nothing but success moving forward to an infinite amount, especially with the pandemic hopefully coming to a close. And as you said, that to make sure that we don't have a second pandemic that is a mental pandemic, that stuck with me, because I know I've experienced that too. So I want you to succeed, and I hope that you know that our organization stateside is at your complete disposal for whatever you may need from us at any point. So thank you, and God bless, and keep fighting the good fight, because you have us in your corner.
Thank you so much. Absolutely delighted to share this time with you and to have the backing of the foundation. I'm such a big fan of the work, obviously, that you do. And I think it's just wonderful that sportsmanship is held in such high esteem by yourselves. And I'm really glad that somebody is, again, fighting that good fight in America as well. And hopefully one day, yes, as you said before, I'll be able to come across and work with some officials in the United States, which would be an absolute dream. Thanks so much.
You're welcome here, and I think Sean will let you crash at his place, because I don't have a place for it. But thank you again, Nathan. Sean, thank you for your work as always. A reminder, not only the thirdteam.co.uk, but osipfoundation.org. Podcast at osipfoundation.org, facebook.com/osipfoundation, Twitter and Instagram at osipfoundation, #HowYouPlayTheGame. So for Nathan, for Sean, thank you everybody for joining us again. We hope you have a fantastic holiday season. We'll talk to everybody in 2021, which I know will be a better year for all of us. So until then, everyone, treat each other with respect.
How You Play the Game is a production of the OSIP Foundation, Incorporated. The producer-engineer of this episode is Sean Ryan. Music by Soundspring Studio. The executive producer of How You Play the Game is Jack Furlong. For more information, visit osipfoundation.org.